Welcome back to another episode of Culinary Connections Distribution Dialogues, where we give you the skinny, the real truth on all things distribution. Joining us today from, I believe, sunny Phoenix, Arizona. Is that right?
Indeed, it's quite lovely today.
Yeah, I just looked at the weather. It looked like it was 77. But Billy Itule is joining us. He is 40 under 40 in the produce business. His family started their distribution company a while ago, and now he is spearheading it. Billy, why don't you give us kind of the elevator pitch of who you are and what you do?
I am a part of the second generation of our family business. My parents started the business back in 1979, and my brother and sister and myself are part of the second generation family that is kind of stewarding it into the next generation. I grew up in the produce world, kind of learning all about it. I mean, I was sorting rotting tomatoes and cucumbers with my brother at like 9 and 10 years old. So really got in from the ground up. It's been quite the ride since I've been here. It's been a lot of fun.
Are you a ASU or Arizona guy?
I'm an Arizona guy. We had a rough night last night. I went to college at Gonzaga though. So ultimately, even though I love Arizona, I'm a Gonzaga fan through and through. So we're still out there hoping.
Big game tonight, I think, right?
Big game, big game. I think we can do it. It wasn't really the best season, but we've been doing pretty well so far in March. So here it goes.
I've had limited interactions in Arizona. First time to Phoenix was when Ole Miss played Arizona State in a super regional in baseball. This is a long, long time ago. And then in 2021, my wife and I went to the waste management. And that's when they only allowed like 5,000 people into the golf grounds.
So that was a long time ago then, Ian. That's been a minute since then. Those were the days.
Yeah, it's that was the COVID year where they let the tournament happen, but we had 16th hole seats and it was a ghost town. Like it was basically a private golf tournament. It was fantastic.
That's awesome.
And then I saw scenes of this year just being just pure mayhem.
Oh yeah, a little bit of chaos out there this year.
But this time of year has got to be very special as the weather is just absolutely fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing. And we're in spring training here, so it's been wonderful. It's a great time of the year to be in Arizona.
Yeah, I know the Rockies, they got waxed last night and they do spring training. We debated, this was spring break week for us, for our kids, and trying to think of something quick that we could do and certainly debated that. But so as a Gonzaga grad, did you have your sights set to come back home? Was there any thought of doing anything else?
No, it was never really on the agenda. I had always thought I wanted to go to law school. And then, as I was a senior and getting ready to graduate, my parents and I just talked a bunch about possibly coming back and joining the business. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll take a chance and we'll see kind of how it works out. And 19 years later, here we are. So it's been a wonderful journey and ride.
Yeah, but I tell people often, when they're like, how'd you get into distribution? Like, you don't really go to school for it. You kind of just find your way in it. In your case, you had family ties to it. But what are some early memories that you have of growing up in the industry?
Oh, well, my parents started the business, and I was born a couple of years after that. And I remember, it was just a kind of a part interweaved in our family life from everything. It was, I remember like the old school pickup trucks. I remember my parents, my mom and dad calling and getting orders off the voicemail and writing them down and placing orders with vendors that we needed for product in, the warehouse, and kind of finding, a team of people and kind of pulling everyone up by their bootstraps and really trying to build something. So it's amazing when you see where we started at, where they started at, and then where we are now, kind of just the evolution, and so much has changed. Since I remember as a young kid. But ultimately, what we do, the foundation of what we do remains the same. It's excellent service, excellent quality, excellent, relationships with people that remain the same. But there have been a lot of changes in the many years here since.
I'm sure as a teenager too, your knowledge of the produce world was far better than anybody else from a
Oh yeah.
standpoint of knowing what kohlrabi is versus
Oh
broccolini.
yeah. Oh yeah. All the difference. I mean, it's a unique thing because I didn't know anyone else like me or our family who, I mean, I knew plenty of people whose parents had their own business or were entrepreneurial, but it's kind of a niche environment. And so it's an interesting world to be a part of because it touches not only distribution, but also this whole concept of perishability. You know, we're not just selling pencils somewhere. These things can rot and go fast. And so there's a whole concept of buying and of, you know, being an excellent and efficient business person on top of it. So there's a lot of angles and a lot of areas that I always found kind of interesting and fascinating from, you know, seeing my parents and what they built and how it kind of evolved.
Do you get termed maybe a food snob by your friends? Like, are they intimidated when you come over? Don't judge my food,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Because
you
you're
know, I
into.
mean, I do like to be adventurous and try different things. I think the biggest thing is that my wife and I and our kids, you know, we love to go out and try new places, and um, because we service so many restaurants and know so many chefs, it's a treat to be able to go out and kind of as part of your job, go out to dinner at different places, places you may not normally go to that are outside of the routine, and engage with people and kind of see all the culinary expression and innovation that they bring to the table. So that's really cool. You know, I remember going to restaurants as an early. You know, my mom is an excellent cook and would always cook a lot, but we would also go out a decent amount. To see customers and to talk to people. And it was fascinating. I feel like it was a great opportunity to learn how to grow up. You know, you have to be professional and in the environment and kind of, you know, be a little more of a grown up kid. And we've tried to emulate that for our kids as well.
Yeah, we went out to dinner this week with a couple friends of ours, and um, I'm very cautious when another couple that's not in the industry chooses a restaurant, and I
Oh,
try not to
yes,
be that person
yes.
that's like, oh,
Yeah,
why are we going here? And sure
sure.
enough, I had an experience that was below average from a standpoint of where I would choose to invest my money, right?
Oh
Because
yeah, for sure. You know, we like to support our chefs, and we're really lucky because we service a variety of different types of restaurants out there. So we have chefs that really span the gamut of kind of the culinary world that they touch. And so it's really fascinating because you have a bunch of different types of food that they specialize in, and we can have a lot of breadth and a lot of experiences in that. So it's cool. And there's a lot of places that I would never hear about normally if I wasn't connected in the food scene in the way that we are. So it's cool to be able to discover new places and see what the hot new themes are out there. And it's cool to know that we are a small part of that success of those places, that we can kind of, you know, provide fresh fruits and vegetables and be a small component of what makes their restaurant the place to be.
yeah, from a produce standpoint, it's so interesting to see the same, like if you were to walk into your warehouse, that same lot of Romas
Oh
could
yeah,
be going to a school, but it could be going to, a Michelin caliber restaurant, or it could be
totally.
going to just a mom and pop style restaurant in a strip mall. Like the
Yeah,
produce world doesn't necessarily discriminate where, you have prime beef, it's typically going into a segment, right? Or
sure.
you're so diversified in being able to serve schools, hospitals. I mean, you name it.
Yeah,
Where
we go all over, and that's I think been a big key to our success. Is really in the past like 10 to 15 years, we've had a real focus not only expanding the restaurant business that we do, which really is the backbone of who we are, but also kind of going into different verticals that have helped us grow and scale in an effective way. So whether it's senior care centers, which are huge in Arizona, senior living facilities, hospitals. We do a tremendous amount of work with school districts across the state. So it's exciting because we can kind of see different avenues that our product gets into the back door, and it's a fascinating way to sort of engage outside of just the restaurant world.
when I got to Colorado, I think there's a stigma that it's a bunch of hippies and everything is organic, and I would say it's not necessarily the case. And having distributed produce primarily in the southeast, moving here and having maybe a bit more of organic reach, it still wasn't overly in food service, not overly relevant. Are you finding the same? I mean, is it still heavily dominated by conventional,
Yeah,
or
We
Yeah,
see a ton of conventional. There are people that really get into that have a real niche for organic or that really are adamant in organic. I think that those are the concepts that typically the base of what they do is organic. So like the entire business,
True
composition
Food
is an
Kitchen.
organic, precisely places like that. That really that's the basis of what they do. We do have other customers that'll dabble in it or have different organic components. So we want to always meet those customers where they're at and service them and be able to give them what they're looking for. But by and large, I'm going to say 90+% of the demand that we see on our side is for conventional.
Yeah, and I would see the same. You know, ultimately, everybody votes with their dollar, right? And when you
Indeed.
see
The price
the
point really drives it.
yeah, the pricing for, just organic Driscoll's versus conventional, right?
Sure.
And a chef is making a decision, and I'd have to remind our customers all the time that, try to use the verbiage organic when possible,
Yeah.
because there's a high likelihood that we're going to short you because most of the organic is going into the retail channel, and so you
Yeah.
could order X amount, and as soon as you get your shipment, you've been cut, and now you're not able to facilitate the needs for that organic user, and the produce is certainly a challenge to manage because
Oh,
the
that's for
truck could
sure.
come out of temp. There's so many variables, right? You could kick a
Yeah.
load right when it hits the dock, and now you're out of
Yeah.
cauliflower for 2-3 extra days because nobody's just waiting around with 8 extra pallets of cauliflower in Phoenix, for you to just maybe buy it, right?
Oh,
So
exactly. I mean, with the perishability and with the way that the supply chain works, and labor is another big key part of it too. It's tough. You have to really be on your game as far as knowing what your customers want, knowing what the needs are. But like you said, there are so many variables from labor to transportation to accidents on the freeway, which I know sounds silly, but that can really snarl interstate traffic that can cause issues. So lot of plates we're spinning constantly, not always many in our control, but really I think you have to in this industry be able to pivot at a moment's notice and be able to say, hey, this ain't gonna work, that's gonna have to work instead. I think that's where we really rely on the relationships we develop with our customers, because we always want to be transparent and honest with them when we get whiff of a problem or a potential problem, I should say, that could be coming. There's a lot of active communication that goes out and say, hey, we are hearing this could possibly happen. It may not, but if it does, what's plan A, what's plan B? And we kind of try to filter that information with our team so everyone's on the same page. The last thing you want is a customer surprised with a last minute issue. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's unavoidable, but we do everything in our power to try and, I don't know if predict's the right word, but try to have a contingency plan. That's probably a better way to say it. So should something go sideways, we have a capacity to kind of say, hey, here's option 2, here's option 3. Let's figure it out.
yeah, I would always go and see a customer, and I would openly say, if you're looking for a perfect company, we're not it.
Totally, we say the same thing.
Like if
We, yeah,
it's
we,
not
we
possible.
we always try to focus on is we're like, what makes us great in our mind is how we react to when the problems happen. We're not going to be perfect, but what we really think helps us kind of define who we are is when something's not perfect, when something goes sideways, when there is a potential issue, whether it's in our control or out of our control. How do we react? How do we make it better? How do we ensure that your guest at your individual restaurant location is not interrupted and that experience isn't interrupted? Because really what we see it as a mutual relationship. The better of a job we do, the better of a job the restaurant could do. And the more people that come to the restaurant, the more people that are going to buy produce from us, essentially. So we are an integral part of that, and making sure that we're a part of that and respect the chain and respect the people in charge and make sure that the guest is always top of mind. It's vital to our success, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are delivering every single day. You are really an extension of the team. I mean, I
Yeah.
guarantee you, your drivers probably get high-fived and fist pounded by,
Oh
the
yeah.
kitchen staff, and they feel it when they go, maybe they go on vacation or leave for whatever reason, right? Like they loved whoever that driver was, and
Oh, they're our
you'll
best advocates. And, they really are the boots on the ground that are seeing our customers every single day when they make those drops. So we spend a lot of time with drivers kind of getting their feedback and understanding, is there an issue that maybe we're missing? Sometimes people will be okay vocalizing it to a driver, but may not have the bandwidth to call the rep or call into the office with a potential issue or a concern. So respecting that relationship and making sure the drivers feel comfortable and approachable with us on our side to make sure they know, hey, if there's an issue, you have an avenue to address it. Let us be that advocate. Let us take it from there. Thank you for giving us that information. It's really important.
You're in a hotbed of a growing region for leafy greens. Have you had a chance to go visit any of those growing
Yeah,
areas?
we've seen them down in Yuma. We've been there in the past, and we're so lucky because we are so close to the source. So, really, it's crazy when you think about it. We have had instances where we could be selling a product today that just got pulled out of the ground yesterday, and it's coming to us that quickly because it's only about 3 hours away from Yuma here. So that sort of close proximity to the source. It's really beneficial. And I always hear these stories about other distributors who are across the country, right? They could be in the Midwest or the East Coast, and it takes things 3, 4, 5 days to get there. And that's astonishing to me because it's just so opposite to what our experience is. So that level of proximity is a real blessing. And I do think, in my mind, I think it makes our job a little easier than it may be in distribution in other parts of the country because the room for error and the kind of potential for error is really condensed because it's so close.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that aren't in the industry forget that produce is grown; it's not manufactured.
Oh yeah.
So,
We tell
you're
people
not
all the
gonna,
time. It's
you
like
know,
people will be like, "Why is there dirt on it?" And I'm like, "It comes out of the ground." And seasonality and labor and all these things really come into effect with it. Where this is the time of year where you see things like as transition starts to occur and we move from Nogales and the Yuma areas back to the central coast of California, you start seeing things like, hey, there's more dirt because they're pulling things faster. There's less kind of turnover time. Sometimes this time of year in some leafy items, you can see some bugs that have burrowed in because as the watering shifts and pattern changes and those sort of things. And it's just going to happen. So it's definitely it's an interesting thing to explain to a customer because I think sometimes a lot of people are accustomed to going to a grocery store and everything there looks perfect. And they don't always understand that the reason it looks perfect is it's been touched and handled and cleaned and washed and every single thing so that it looks perfect for the consumer ultimately there. It's not always the same in food service distribution where it's just box upon box of stuff. But that's where that communication comes in, where people understand this is the time of year where we are especially proactive with customers and saying, hey, transition is coming, growing regions are shifting. Things can sometimes get a little haywire, a little crazy. And we let us know what you're seeing. If we're missing something, we want to make sure we're on top of it. But there is that time of year where this can get a little wild.
no question. What about, you got involved 19 years ago. How has your processes changed in those 19 years from a standpoint of the way that you guys pick and pack orders, that you
Oh,
access
everything.
information?
Every,
Yeah.
I mean, I joke with friends and stuff that sometimes I feel like we're more of an IT company than we are a produce distribution company these days because the advent of technology and these technological progressions that have made really have shifted everything. Gone are the days of, like a pick sheet and just writing an order down and pulling it on a piece of paper. Everything is electronic now. All of our inbound product is scanned and put away, and it's scanned going out as it's delivered to customers. So it's a whole different world. It's a whole different way of operating. Uh, the old school ways really no longer exist in our marketplace anymore. And there's a lot of good reason for that with the real positive steps that food safety has made in identifying issues and really doing everything it can to prevent issues. It requires that sort of, consistent IT investment to make sure that there's a traceability component, where the product is coming from, where the product is going to. But it's shifted everything that we do.
Well, now you also know velocity, right? You can
Oh
have
yeah.
historical data. It's not written on a legal pad.
Completely. You're not like looking up old notebooks with information. We can pull usages and all that kind of stuff electronically. And there are software out there that are coming up that are really getting into predictive modeling in the AI world. We don't use any of it yet, but it's interesting to hear about it because they're starting to predict, hey, with with different weather patterns and different weekends and different, holidays and things like that. There is a cycle to all of this, and it can shift. So some of the historical sort of things, oh, it's always busy on this weekend, or these anecdotal things, they still exist for sure. But with IT advancements and the way it's happened, really the way we operate, the way we learn about it, the way we plan for it, the way we execute, all that has shifted in the years. I mean, it's a whole different world, from handwriting invoices way back in the day to now everything's electronics.
So you guys are on Produce Pro. I'm very fluent in
Uh-huh.
the Produce Pro system myself. How long have you guys been using it, and how much has it changed really? I mean, we touched on it just a little bit, but
Oh yeah,
particularly, that
it's been a
software.
game changer. Completely changed everything. We've been on it for I think like 6 years now, right around 6 years. I'm a real tech oriented guy. And when we realized a change needed to be made, for us, the only real option out there was Produce Pro. We had so many other distributors that we knew that used them, that were able to kind of be great, resources for us as far as information and what needs to happen and all that kind of stuff, the way to work it. And the Produce Pro team has been incredible, and what they have done with that software and how they have really morphed it into, in my opinion, the best in class option for produce distribution is amazing. There's the core system, which is your basic ERP system. Theirs is anything but basic, but it's what I mean basic. It's just a standard ERP setup. And then the module add-ons that they have really been what the game changers have been for us. So WMS, a warehouse management system that really facilitates everything that happens in the warehouse and ties in to our ERP with costing and with all that sort of inventory day-to-day knowledge that needs to happen. And every little department of ours has a different need, that all is aggregated into one area. About a year and a half, maybe 2 years now, we deployed the driver app, the driver solution through Produce Pro, which has been another huge thing for us. So we are probably 80 to 85% paperless now in our deliveries that we do, which is amazing. Saves a lot of paper, a lot of trees. We deliver on tablets, and it's real life GPS and tracking. And there's a lot of power in it, where if there are issues, if a customer needs an emergency situation, if there's traffic, if there's accidents, whatever it is, we have these huge strings where we can move things around and kind of play with stuff and reroute drivers at a moment's notice. And it's a really strong tool for us. So we've been nothing but happy and pleased with the Produce Pro experience and the progression they have made. It allows us to do, I think, the best version of our job.
IFTA came out with their annual report. It said that there's 17,000 food service distributors across the country. Some of them could be small jobbers, regardless.
Yeah.
They're delivering food, and I'm still blown away that there's a lot of companies that run their business, on an Excel spreadsheet,
Oh,
and they don't
isn't it
have
shocking like how that
pick,
works?
pick locations, right?
Yeah,
To be able to say where, you're like, oh, well, Ian usually works on Wednesdays. He could tell you where the limes are, right? And
it's crazy. And I
not
really
having
think,
those.
with the Food Safety Modernization Act that's coming, the FSMA Acts, the rules, I think it's Rule 204 or 206, that's coming. I think that's going to shift a lot. It's going to have to shift, because what the FSMA rules are going to do, I think, is it's going to push everyone into some sort of a WMS, because that's going to be the information that's necessary. And really, that's where people that are distributors should be at, because if we are going to be selling food to the public, there is, this is just my Billy opinion, a social responsibility to ensure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that that food is as safe and secure as possible. And recalls are going to happen. Things are going to happen. It is inevitable. It is how our industry works. It's how it's always worked. You can never prevent everything. We know we're not growing any of the product. We're simply moving the case from point A to point B. But we really see it as a responsibility of ours to ensure that we know what is going where. And if there is an issue, that we can get that product identified and destroyed and resolved as fast as possible to kind of limit any sort of exposure out there. I see it's a real social responsibility as far as I'm concerned. I always tell customers, listen, I service my kids' school. So I want to make sure that if there was a recall or something, that my kids or not their friends or anyone like that is not consuming this product. So we looked at all the populations we service and we're like, yeah, we have a responsibility to these people who are entrusting us with their business to make sure that we're kind of doing everything we can to make sure it's the safest and most secure product possible.
Yeah, scalability, food safety, super important.
Yeah,
Local and regional foods are important to everyone. And but the reality is whether it's your company or another company, you can't go pick up from 50 farms,
yeah,
that they don't have food safety practices, right? As much
yeah.
as you would love to have some of the people at the farmers market, the the reality is that's not a scalable thing for you to be able to bring to market and consistently offer the
Absolutely.
customer.
We talk about this with customers all the time who will say, hey, I saw this cool thing at this place. So I'm like, all right, well, what is the thing and what is the place? And I'll put my people on it. And then our food safety teams will engage and they'll come back and say, hey, this place is a farmer's marketplace. There's no food safety, there is no certification. And so we go back to the customers and say, listen, we cannot sell you this product. Nothing can enter our doors to be sold to any of our customers that doesn't meet a certain set of food safety audited criteria. And there are just times we have to say no. We don't ever want to upset a customer. We don't ever want to cause an issue with someone or let someone down. And we work with customers when we're like, if you really liked that product, let us go find something that may be equivalent that you might like just as much. But it's tough. And the local part of it is tough because you want to support the local economy. You want to support local growers, but you have to do it in a safe and secure way. So it's balancing all of that and making sure that you have that satisfaction level from your customers, but also making sure that you are protecting the entire chain at the same time.
What's buzzy right now in the produce world outside of fiddleheads, ramps, morels, but
Oh,
like
yeah.
you know
I think cauliflower is making a real resurgence. We've seen a lot of like cauliflower ads on some of our more progressive customers, I guess you could say, who are looking at different sort of things. Um, I've noticed a lot of cauliflower lately. We've noticed some focus on organics, but really an organic item or two, not necessarily an entirely organic dish. And then another big thing, I know it's not the same as the fiddleheads and stuff you're talking about, but microgreens really are blowing up, I think, in popularity. Because there's so many cool things that come from the microgreen world and product lines that can be offered from these microgreen companies. And I think people used to associate it just with a garnish, like, hey, it's a cool garnish. This is interesting, whatever, it's great. But I think what's really it's moved to is a world where, hey, this could really change the flavor profile of a dish. It could really change how a dish is presented, what it looks like. It has interesting color and interesting history and interesting kind of texture to it. We've even seen a lot of microgreens go into schools for like fresh fruit and vegetable programs where it's like, hey, the kids can try this. I brought some home once and my kids were like, that looks like grass, Dad. And I'm like, well, I know it may look like grass or a weed, but I assure you it's really cool. And we partner with some great microgreen companies that really do a great job in education and teaching people what it's like and what availability is out there. So I see a lot of innovation in that world as well.
what do you particularly like in the specialty produce like that's fun and exciting? Mine is finger limes. That those are fun to me. Uh,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
put
Yeah.
those on a scallop and it's got beautiful color and just has that.
Yeah, I think there's some cool specialty tomatoes out there that are really interesting. And you see kind of these heirlooms that come around every so often that are really fascinating. I think that we've seen a lot of innovation in, like, there's now a cauliflower broccolini blend, caulolini. So I think what I've seen some interesting areas in the specialty world is I don't believe it's GMO related, but it's these blending and kind of crossbreeding of stuff together, kind of a natural crossbreeding that's been really interesting. We'll eat it all. We'll try everything and stuff. I think it's a fun kind of time to be experimentative. And I'm very lucky because I have an entire, warehouse full of stuff that I can try at any moment. So it's a real blessing to be able to be like, hey, if I wanted to bring some random thing home and play around with it, that's a possibility.
That's awesome. What about talking about sales or your sales team? How many people are on the team, and like what's the strategy? What's that kind of workflow that you get in and try to like inspire, encourage, teach the team? How are you guys evaluating the business, I guess, when it comes to
Yeah.
sales?
Right now, we sales for us, salespeople, I should say, for us was a challenge during COVID because getting qualified salespeople back in the building after COVID. And what I mean by back in the building is hiring new people, hiring new talent. Sales can be a challenge in this industry. We have about 4 salespeople right now that kind of handle inside and outside. We always want to increase that. But sales is tough because produce is such a nuanced specialty that it's hard to sort of ramp someone up to produce sales, is what we find. Not impossible, but it can be challenging. So we work a lot and try to build out inside sales in that way where people who may not be able to be customer facing for whatever reason, but inside an office can kind of expand that book of business also. And then really a lot of it is just hitting the streets, getting people out there and blanketing the streets, and also really thinking about how you tailor sales and what verticals you're going to for sales. But we're always looking for new salespeople.
Yeah, produce is for those not in the industry. A tomato is not just a tomato. There's so many different varieties and applications and rhymes and
All these,
reasons
yeah. I
why.
mean, if someone could call and say, okay, I need lettuce, and it's like, well, there could be 50 options for lettuce. And so we have not always had the most success. And this may be a representation of us, frankly. We do our best and try and bring people up to it. But finding people who have some sort of history in sales in the food sphere, ideally produce, but in the food sphere in general, there's a little bit of an easier you know process bringing them on. There's a little bit higher of a success rate that we see.
When it comes to your book of business, you've got such a diverse portfolio of people that you can sell to. In produce, is really, I feel, the only area that you can kind of have more fixed pricing,
Yeah.
because you do have Produce Alliance and you've got CH Robinson and all, these contractual agreements. Have those changed over the years? Are they getting more complicated?
Uh, I think it can be more complicated, and I think really you have to kind of look at your book of business and your procurement ways and sort of see what aligns best with you. Whether you blend, there is no doubt that what you said with third party management companies, there's a lot of offerings, but there's a lot of fixed or at least fixed contracts. And I don't always even mean fixed as price, but just fixed as in I have to use this grower, this contract, this way of doing things. So you do have to build around that. But those aren't necessarily bad things. They can just be different things. And what we find a lot of times is that learning how to take those requirements and build procurement strategies around that can be super successful. A real benefit to the third party management companies is even though there may be some more, goalposts one has to play in, they also open up a whole breadth of options that we may not normally have access to. And the scale that they have and the capacity they have to see other growers. And you know what it's like in the produce world. You're used to buying lettuce from Ian's farm, therefore you're going to always buy lettuce from Ian's farm. And you may have never heard of Billy's farm, even though Billy's farm may be just as good or even better. The pricing may be just as good as even better. So, which isn't a bad thing. Loyalty is important and vital, and the way we do business is based on those relationships. But I think you have to really kind of take a step back and look at what options fit your customers the best way. And that's going to be a blend of how many customers are on contracts, what are the contract needs and requirements, and how do you build a procurement strategy around that.
Yeah, I think a lot of, especially in markets like a Phoenix or a Denver, where it's a very populated city, but I mean, 8 hours surrounding Phoenix, there's not a whole lot of stuff that
Yep.
you're reaching. And so the realities of going to one particular shed to
Oh,
go pick up some 6 items for, one of the concepts, and the concept gets frustrated. Well, so and so can do it in Texas. Well, yeah, they
yeah,
have 22
of course.
locations, and
Of course.
you can
When
pull
someone
from New
says this
Orleans.
one location, there is no option. It has to be this label romaine hard for this person, and that's the end of it, right? And it's 1 case a week usage or 3 cases a week usage. That
And you don't
happens.
want to be, you want to be a good steward to the business and like help the customer, but the reality is like there's there is practicality in
Oh,
logistics and
sure.
freight, and then warehouse space. So now you want me to have another pallet space
Yep.
just for the 6 cases, you know.
Well, those, and that's where I really lean into those relationships. And you can't always find the solution you might be looking for. But I think leaning into those relationships and saying, hey, this is where having that partnership with whether it's a third party management company or the corporate customer and saying, hey, I understand what you're trying to do and we want to be the best partner possible, but here's the challenge with this. So if we try, what are our backup options? What does this look like? How do we look at costing for these items? And again, you're not going to always win. You're not going to always get your way with it, which can be challenging. But I think we're in the business where you have to be willing to try and you have to be willing to say, you know what, I'm going to throw my best effort at it and we'll kind of see where the cards fall.
Let's talk about the digital footprint right now. Social media has obviously impacted our lives at work and away from work.
Um,
Is that a big emphasis for you guys that you're talking with your team either about growing your social footprint either independently as an individual and as a company, or is it not overly relevant right now? Are people finding you via social?
yeah. So I would say it's a two-part answer. It should be more relevant than it is to us right now. I mean, I think that's something that we recognize, and I think we do a lot of things well. I think social we do an average job on, and we could do better. We're in the process of a rebrand with like logos, and we're going to roll out a new website and that kind of stuff. And at some point, as a part of that revamp process, we're going to assess social and what we can do to try and engage a little more. But could we do better? Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge with social is, you have to have a person to do that content creation. You want the content creation to be good. You want it to be attractive. You want it to be able to hit the right kind of people. In my experience, at least for a company of our size, I don't think that would necessarily be a full-time job. So you have to then utilize someone else or using an agency for it. So it's figuring out how to balance it all. But I do think that that's where more and more people are at. And that's where more and more people look for stuff. And so we need to be there. And I think our sort of, 6 month to a year roadmap for these kind of brand changes and these sort of rollouts that we're doing, there's going to be a social component that has a little more of an emphasis in there.
How important or not important is online app ordering for you?
It's
Has it
huge.
changed
Huge.
the way that 10
It's
years
huge for
ago
us.
versus today?
We got out of the gate early with online ordering and it's been super successful. I would say we probably have 80+% of our customers placing their orders online, via online or app based, same beast, but kind of electronically done. There are some that just can't. There are some that just won't. So those are all possibilities. But it has been huge for us because it is really where customers want to be. It's where we need to be. It's a way to sort of advertise additional products. We're super excited because we have begun a partnership with Pepper, and we are going to be using them to kind of really enhance the online efforts that we have in place already. I think that their software and their capacity is really good, and we're excited to kind of in the rollout phase with them right now, and we're excited to see what they can do. We've heard a lot of great stories about how sales can increase with it, but we looked at them and we're like, we need something. There's nothing wrong with Produce Pro's solution with it. It's a good solution. Pepper kind of gave a little more optionality and a little more customization that we could take advantage of. And we could then use that to kind of potentially, bring new customers in, be a more attractive sort of place. Everyone wants it to look good and feel good and operate in the right way. It's not just so much now. I feel like a couple of years ago, it was much more about, do you have a platform or not? Now it's, do you have a platform? What's the functionality? What does it look like? How do I go off catalog? How do I search for the latest and greatest? From the customer perspective, what does the app look like? Can I pay my bill on there?
Can I run a report on it?
All that, exactly. I want to, how do I make it sheet to shelf and all that kind of stuff, right? So important things. And on our side, what we see is, hey, how do we bring on new product lines that we can advertise to other people in an effective way. And whether or not they follow us on social, to your point, or not, if 80% of our customers are logging into a portal, they're going to see something if we can put it in the portal. So this partnership with Pepper, we're really excited for. We think it's going to really help in a number of ways. We're piloting with a few people that we've already had, a great amount of success with and positive feedback. But it's something we looked at. We were like, hey, we got to continue to be top of game with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's table stakes at this point. Like you just have to have it, really. I mean, we're just so reliant on
Absolutely.
it for, you know, every company, regardless of industry, has a variety of ages that, work within it. And I guarantee you, uh, the older people are using Uber, they're booking their flights,
Oh, for sure. For
they're,
sure.
they're, they're using, one of the hesitations I think people have had in introducing a web app is um, chefs are old school. Yeah, there's some old school chefs that
Yeah.
you're going to run into, but for the most part, like now it's like Cisco, US, everyone has a platform,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like they're
Absolutely.
they're they're having to use it.
Well,
So
and I
it's
mean, I look at my kids' generation. My oldest is 12, so she's not entering, the workforce anytime soon in a kitchen setting yet. But what's interesting is that their entire life is app based and online based. And so I know it's kind of silly to think 10 years down the road or something, but I think my point of it is that we are generationally heading towards a place where if you don't have something, you're not even going to be in the conversation. And if you don't have something that's good, you're going to be at the low part of the conversation, right? So I'm trying to look and plan out for our business and say, hey, let's make that roadmap. Let's try and be the best. We don't necessarily need to be the best today in this, but how do we get there? What's our roadmap to being the best place? How do we partner with people like Produce Pro and like Pepper to really bring it to be a best class of experience for our customers? Because that's what's happening out here. Whether you want to admit it or not, that is. I wouldn't even say that's the future. I would say that's the now. And so we have to capitalize on it and make sure we're meeting people where they're at.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. If you've never heard of him, he's a great digital media advocate, owns an agency in New York, and he's like, look, it doesn't matter. The market is the market,
Uh
and
huh.
you can have an opinion on it, but the reality is, like, look at, I always tell people, go to an airport, where are people's heads? It's in their phone, right? Like
Totally, totally.
it just
It's like I said.
is.
I mean, it used to just be, do you have something? Well, now we're well past, do you have something? It's how good is what you have, and how do you intend on making it better, and how can I take advantage of it? And so, and it's hard sometimes in industries, and maybe this is industry or universal, I guess, but you got to put yourself in your customer's shoes and say, okay, what's beneficial, what's useful for them. And I think when you have a broad customer base like we do, what's important to Ian's pizza shop may be different than what's important to Billy's senior care facility. So it's how do you marry the two? How do you find a commonality between that and make it work on that level where everyone is sort of getting what it is they need in an effective way? That's cost effective for you, right? That's not like breaking the bank. That's not a position in which you have to see some ROI with it. But we were sort of early adopters, I think, in the online ordering world, essentially, and it's paid off a lot.
you know Starting my own business right now. Where my business partner lives in Nashville, and we have a small business or small bank that we work with for our personal banking and or business banking. And there's a big relationship with us in the bank. You can call the president, and it's just it's a one bank. It's in Kentucky, and I'm used to Wells Fargo and some of the bigger banks, and I get on their online platform to try to deposit a check. I'm like, why the hell is this thing so clunky?
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
it's not every experience is the same. And this particular bank that we use for our business banking, I'm just scratching my head like the user experience is so clunky here. When Wells Fargo, it's like really pretty. It's super easy to do a mobile deposit. Like I can do instant transfers, and here I'm like, how am I trying to
Oh,
navigate
totally. Yeah.
this Excel spreadsheet? And that I think is something that, you know, maybe before distributors really didn't have to think about their digital footprint, but now it's like super important, and it could be a deterrent to why someone doesn't do business with you. It's like,
I completely agree. And we see now in new business RFPs more than ever more detail wanted on your digital footprint and what you offer and what you plan on offering and what they can take advantage of. So I think it's really got into the customer's mind as well, not just in a nuanced sort of, hey, I'm the chef at this location, or I want this to look good, but really at the corporate level. They're starting to assess things in a different way and say, how can I pull this information out and access what I need to in a way that we haven't seen before? So you kind of have to prove your tech bona fides in a way you never had to in the past.
you talked about uh, having the platform to be able to launch new products. Your business mix is primarily produce. Are you doing dairy? Or are you kind of venturing into new categories?
We do dairy. We do some meats, a little bit of meat. Really, that was customer requested that we kind of brought on. We do can liners, stuff like that. We're kind of dipping our toes into other product lines to see how we work on it, what we do, how to do it the right way. But we're open to anything. We've done everything from jams to sodas. A lot of it has been customer driven at this point. So a customer would say, "Hey, I want to use you for everything. I need a solution for jams." And our answer is, "You got it. You tell me what to do. We'll get it done." We had a customer who needed help with crab and who needed help with shrimp. And it's our job to figure out, how do we do it? How do we do it as efficiently as possible? How do we do it so that their experience is as easy as possible? And, produce is a natural home for that because we see customers so frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike broadliners, I don't know how other, meat or the dairy world work, but unlike a broadliner who may only see a customer once or twice or three times a week, depending on volume and size, we're there 4, 5, 6 times a week. So it's a natural home for those things, and it's learning kind of the nuances and the ins and outs of how do you sell it effectively, how do you be profitable on it, how do you make sure that it's the spec that the customer would want. I never knew that there were so many different types of containers and lids, and I mean the options are endless, right? There's a million different ways to do it. So we are gathering information, and we're kind of, like I said, dipping our toes in the water to see what is out there and what the appetite is for and what we can do to kind of expand.
Well, and that's a great thing that now, partnering with a platform and using data, you can pull search history of like 100 people search for, coffee lids, right? Like
Exactly.
now you don't have to like wonder what you should carry. Is like, if people are searching for this stuff, there's obviously like they're interested in it, and if you did offer it, you'd likely sell it. And
Oh, absolutely. And I think with these platform enhancements like Pepper, where you can offer like ads, if you will, and kind of like highlighted items and things that you may not normally sell, people may not normally know that you carry. I mean, our catalog is like nearing, I gotta think, 2,000 plus items of stuff that we have available. So someone may just never even think of us when they think of can liner. Well, how do we get there? How do we get them to think of Billy Itule produce with that? And it's interesting because, my brother and sister we're all partners together, and we all work together, and we always talk about these scenes where it's like, how do we touch upon these places? How do we get to these other areas where people are thinking about this or that? We want them to think, don't look for another solution. You have the solution right here. You have the solution to Billy Itule produce. And I think a lot of that is using technology to sort of highlight what we have and to kind of advertise what we have in a way where you have a captive audience. And when they're in the app and they're captive, it's how do we take the most advantage of that possible?
I mean, it's for anyone that's used Instacart, or
Oh
if
yeah,
they're
like
using
the
any type
easiest
of,
stuff ever.
online ordering for a restaurant, right? Like their menu is online and you pick off of the menu, right? And
Yeah.
maybe you went to a Thai restaurant and you were going to order pho, but then you said, "Oh, this cool beef dish looks intriguing. I'm going to get this." And you would have never done that had you not, seen the menu. And it's all the platform is doing. And I've talked to many people that are fearful it's going to eliminate human interaction. It's like,
I'm sure. Yeah.
it doesn't. It just enhances the ability to serve the customer better
Yeah.
because if Billy doesn't pick up the phone when I call to place my order, maybe chef is about to go play a round of golf because it's a sunny afternoon and he doesn't get another chance to do it the rest of the week. He's just going to call the next person that picks up to get the order placed. And now you lose out on the sale. And so,
Absolutely. And I think
you're,
it's a good jumping off point too, because we have had people who have said, "Hey, do you carry this or that?" And once you kind of have an idea of what they're looking for, it's yeah. And you know what? Have you ever thought about a solution for your a liquid milk or your eggs, or what about cheeses? And they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you carry cheeses." And I'm like, "Well, we do, and let's talk about that, and let's see what potentials and possibilities lie there." So it's interesting, and I think it really gets the conversation going. But when we look at tech advancements, we sort of look at it from those sort of perspectives, where it's like, how does this really propel us to the next level? How does it propel us to more sales and more intelligent sales?
yeah, I mean, I remember, early days of my selling, street selling career, stapling a cheese list together, right? And it
Oh
had
yeah,
all the cheeses and the pricing and,
uh
leaving it on a counter for someone. But then you can't hit the description of what Point Reyes is, where does it come
huh,
from and what nuances. Now it's like you hit the thing and it tells you the country of origin and all the, fun romantic facts about the product. And it's an
yeah,
educational tool for a salesperson, right? Like,
oh yeah, for sure,
how many times you're like, oh, I had no idea we carried oat milk. Well, okay, where's this
totally,
oat milk
yeah.
from?
It's really funny because the bid request we've been working on, we've had a lot of customers say, "Hey, we would love to see more pictures of items."
Mm,
Okay, so they may have heard the word kohlrabi, but they're not necessarily sure if they've seen kohlrabi before. What is a kohlrabi? What does it look like? Oh, I have seen that. I remember how this was prepared, or this or that. So one of our reps is working with the Pepper team, and he is upload where we are just like full on finding pictures of every single item that we can and getting it in there to kind of build out this catalog for it. And it's been an interesting thing because it really, I had no idea how much a visual cue would be beneficial to people in that process. I mean, I just sort of assume like, hey, they know what this is, or hey, our rep knows what this is. Frankly, sometimes, hey, I know what this is. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, do I? Like, let's have that visual sort of like cross reference there. So, but it's been a big demand and people have asked for it. It's another version, I think, of customer service, meeting people where they want to be at. That's the world that we're in, and how do you get there?
yep, no, I couldn't agree. We're coming up on time. A couple of questions left. For those really wanting to advance themselves in the produce world, you've worked hard to kind of build yourself up in the industry, right? Like you didn't have to start doing these conferences and networking. And what advice would you give to someone that's really trying to become an up and comer or
Yeah.
just build themselves in the industry?
I think, I volunteered for a lot of stuff. If there was an option, if we got invited to something or someone said, "Hey, I'm looking for someone to be on this committee or I'm looking for this conversation," I always raised my hand and said, "Sure, I'm in," because I wanted to learn more and I wanted to kind of network more. And there's a huge need out there for people to bring whatever level of expertise they have to these general groups, to different committees across, IFPA. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there that you have to avail yourself of. And networking, I think, is one of the biggest things. And that's just networking with fellow distributors. When I was a part of Produce Alliance, had an inaugural, this is many years ago, next gen board. And I was on that board, and it was great because we were newish, but what we were able to do is say, hey, we're the next gen leaders of these companies and a part of these organizations, and we want to absorb everything we can. We want to learn, hey, from that founder entrepreneurial world, how do we take that and build upon that? And a lot of it is just networking with other people, getting to know other people. I made a ton of friends in the industry, and I will call them up and say, hey, how do you do this? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And being open to that sort of feedback, and then putting yourself out there for those volunteer opportunities and being a part of it, going to conferences when you can, and participating in those. I think it never hurts to kind of make a name for yourself that way. People want to congregate around those who want to be an active part of something. So I think that you have to just figure out what that niche for you is and do everything you can to pursue it.
I think you're spot on the. I mean, shoot, most of the battle is just showing up. Like that's
Big time,
all.
right? Getting people there and saying, hey, yeah, I'll be on the call. I'll do this. Sure. And it's not always glorious. It's not always a great sort of thing. I mean, it's, sometimes it's like, oh, I'm stuck in an Excel document of compiling this information, all that kind of stuff. We do it. I did it. I put a smile on my face. I'm like, hey, let's learn from it. Let's glean something from it. I always thought kind of selfishly, hey, even if this doesn't get me anywhere with anyone else, it gives me a little more nugget of information for our family company. And maybe that helps me with something. Maybe not, but I'd rather know it than not know it.
What about premier produce event that you love going to, that you find fruitful, for anyone that wants to go to something that's going to really sharpen your skills?
Oh, I mean, I have a soft spot for the IFPA. I always call it the PMA, but now it's the IFPA, the National Food Service Conference in Monterey. I grew up going there as a kid with my parents, and I go every year. And I think it is a great place where a lot of industry. It To me, it's one of the premier industry events that is offered. You have pretty much every major grower in the country that congregates there, along with tons and tons of major distributors. And there's so much thought that goes into the event. The IFPA does a wonderful job. So many networking opportunities and programming options that are there. I think they do a spectacular job of it, and being able to kind of get into the room with a lot of people who have their pulse on every single thing in the industry. They're brilliant people. I think the programming they do with the meetings and the different options to kind of dive into different specialties you may be in, they have breakouts that are fascinating. So if you had to pick one, that would be the initial one on my list. If you're in the distributor world like we are, I'm sure if you're a grower or something different, there may be one that's a little more, tailored towards that. And I think growers have a big presence at the IFPA, obviously, but I think for distribution, and that sort of marriage of distribution plus grower shipper, you can't beat Monterey in the summertime.
I'm going to make my way out there this summer. That's the one of the shows that I've not been to that I think is important to the industry and really honing your skills. Last question, how do you find inspiration? How do you sharpen yourself? What's your routine? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you read? Like,
Oh yeah,
you've got to be it for the company, right? So how do you stay
I'm a
sharp?
I'm a big podcast guy. I do love to kind of bliss out and like listen to a podcast. But really, ultimately, what recharges me, even though it exhausts me at the same time, is spending time with my family and my kids. Um, they are old enough now. I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, and it's the sports and the events. And like I said, it can be very tiring, but it really kind of fills me up, and it's fun to kind of see them develop and grow, and I find it recharging. It's nice. Business is vital, it's important, but nothing beats family in my book. And even if I've had a bad day, when I get home and I can reset with them, there's nothing better. And a couple months ago, my son had a project at school that is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he brought home a picture of a Billy Itule produce truck, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I was like, this is amazing. It's just wonderful because, of course, I want them to do whatever they want to do. Is there a part of me that one day they'd be like, Dad, I'd love to join the family business with you and my aunt and my brother and sister, their aunt and uncle? Yeah, that would be incredible. But just that, we have that connectivity and that connection, I think it's really great. So that's kind of what that resets me. It exhausts me. And many times I'm like, I could really use a break at this point from everything, but there's nothing better than seeing that at the end of the day.
That's amazing. Yeah, spring break week for Denver public schools, and so we didn't take a spring break. And my wife and I juggled the kids, and I brought my son and daughter to a sales meeting with a customer to go see a chef and taste them on a couple of different products this week that we represent. And my daughter, who is 7, I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old, so it's still, we're in wrangling stage, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's still kind of keeping them wrangled, but she was sitting there doing the dropper of vinegar, and I told my wife, I said, by the end of the summer, I guarantee you she could give the spiel.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want to sell food one day. I was like, oh, that's freaking cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
It's like, it's such a cool experience, and I love it. I hear those kind of things, and it's crazy to think that what that next generation could be like. I mean, who knows, right? The sky's the limit.
Well, Billy, thanks for jumping on and sharing your story and insights. The takeaway for me is show up and get in the room. If you do those two things, you're going to have a chance to advance your career. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.